Sarah Collins had everything a woman could want in the city: a corner office, a six-figure salary, and an apartment overlooking the downtown skyline. But something was missing, a void that no amount of success could fill. When her company sent her to a small Montana town to oversee a land development project, she never imagined her life would change forever. She first saw him at the local diner, a rugged man with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee. His name was Jake Turner, and he worked as a ranch hand in the mountains, earning barely enough to get by. His boots were worn, his truck was older than she was, and his tiny cabin had no running hot water. But when he smiled at her, something stirred in her heart that all the wealthy men in the city had never awakened. Their courtship was simple. He took her horseback riding through wild flower meadows. He taught her how to fish in crystal streams. He played guitar for her under blankets of stars that the city lights had always hidden. Her friends called her crazy when she told them she was falling for a mountain cowboy who owned nothing but a horse, a dog, and a worn leather Bible his grandmother had given him. Her mother flew out to Montana to talk some sense into her. "You're throwing away everything," she cried. "He can't give you the life you deserve. You'll be poor, struggling, forgotten." But Sarah had never felt more alive than when she was with Jake. He treated her like she was precious, not because of her bank account or her designer clothes, but because of who she was when she stopped pretending to be someone else. When Jake proposed with a simple silver ring he'd made himself from an old spoon, Sarah said yes without hesitation. They married in a small ceremony at the foot of the mountains, with only a handful of locals and her disappointed parents in attendance. Her colleagues stopped calling. Her old friends dropped away one by one. She traded her heels for boots, her suits for flannel, and her corner office for a life of early mornings and honest work. The first year was hard. Money was tight, and the cabin was cold in winter. There were nights when Sarah lay awake, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. But then Jake would pull her close, whisper that everything would be okay, and somehow she believed him. He worked harder than any man she'd ever known, never complaining, always grateful for the little they had. On their first anniversary, Jake woke her before dawn and told her he had something to show her. They drove for hours into the mountains, past roads she didn't know existed, through forests so thick the sunlight barely broke through. Sarah didn't ask questions because she had learned to trust him completely. When they finally stopped, they were standing at the edge of a valley so beautiful it took her breath away. Rolling green pastures stretched for miles, bordered by snow-capped peaks that touched the clouds. A river wound through the land like a silver ribbon, and in the distance, she could see horses running free, their manes flowing in the wind. "Jake, this is incredible," she whispered. "Who owns all this?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he took her hand. "My family has owned this land for 6 generations. These mountains, this valley, everything you see for the next 30 miles, in every direction. It was given to my great-great-grandfather by the government for his service in the Civil War. Over the years, we discovered it sits on top of one of the richest natural aquifers in the state. 3 major water companies have been trying to buy this land for decades. Last offer was $400 million. Sarah couldn't breathe. She turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign that this was a joke. But his eyes were serious, tender, and slightly nervous. "I don't understand," she managed to say. "You live in a tiny cabin. You work as a ranch hand. You drive a truck that breaks down every other week." Jake nodded slowly. "My father taught me something important before he died. He said that money reveals who people really are. He married 3 women before my mother, all of them drawn by the family wealth. They left when they realized he wouldn't spend it on mansions and yachts, that he believed in living simply and protecting this land for future generations. When he finally met my mother, he was working as a farmhand 3 towns over. She fell in love with him when he had nothing. She never knew about any of this until after they'd been married for 2 years. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she wasn't sure if they were from shock, joy, or something deeper. I needed to know, Jake continued, his voice thick with emotion. I needed to know that someone could love me, just me, without all of this. I'm sorry I wasn't honest with you, Sarah. I was afraid. I was so afraid of losing you if you ever found out, and equally afraid of never really knowing if your love was real. Sarah thought about the cold nights in the cabin, the meals they'd stretched to make ends meet, the times she'd reassured her worried mother that happiness wasn't measured in dollars. She thought about how she'd given up everything comfortable and certain for this man who she thought had nothing to offer but himself. You were enough, she said softly. You were always enough. If we had stayed in that cabin forever, I would have stayed with you. I chose you, Jake. Not a lifestyle, not security, not comfort. You. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood there for a long time, overlooking the valley that would now be their home. In that moment, Sarah understood something profound about love and about life. The greatest treasures aren't always visible to the eye. Sometimes they're hidden, waiting for someone pure of heart to discover them. They built their home in that valley, not a mansion, but a comfortable house filled with warmth, children's laughter, and more love than Sarah had ever imagined possible. Jake continued to live simply, giving most of their wealth to causes that mattered. Protecting the land, building schools, drilling wells in countries where clean water was a distant dream. And every year on their anniversary, they returned to that spot on the ridge where he first showed her the truth. Sarah's mother eventually came to understand. He was rich all along, she marveled during one visit. But Sarah just smiled and shook her head. No, Mom, he was always rich in the ways that mattered. The land, the money, that was just extra. The real treasure was his heart. And somehow, against all odds, he gave it to me. In the end, Sarah discovered that she hadn't married a poor mountain cowboy at all. She had married the wealthiest man she would ever know. Someone rich in integrity, patience, faith, and love. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.